We're going to be talking about the Tomorrow War, Fear Street 1994, and possibly No Sound of Moves. So, Deuce, without further ado, let's start with the Tomorrow War, which is probably the biggest blockbuster of this whole thing.
Let's do it.
Tomorrow War stars Chris Pratt, and it has another actress's name. I don't know how to say her name, to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I don't want to butcher that. So how do you say it?
Yvonne Strahovski.
Oh, there you go. See? Stars both of them, and it's a sci-fi movie about this guy who essentially can travel to the future to fight against aliens, and has to team up with scientists to put a stop to them and travel back.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly how they pitched it in the room, too.
But, dude, I imagine they pitched it like this. Imagine a Michael Bay film where they have to fight aliens in the future, but we make it sound smart even though it's not that smart.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate interpretation, too.
And the producer's like, okay, well, who would be the one to, explain the movie to the audience? Chris Pratt!
He's an everyman, just like anybody. He works as a teacher, but he's also got a military background and is kind of a brilliant scientist, all at the same time.
And he's a very ripped teacher, mind you.
I love that we have to have that scene where he takes his shirt off, just obligatory. It's like, oh.
Yeah, that's the quick synopsis of the movie. Realistically, what it is that it's scientists having to fight against these aliens that will attack in the future, because the future selves kind of come back in the past to be like, we need your help, and they recruit people that way. Which, dude, I'd be like, fuck that. There's no way.
Right.
Aliens? Let's talk with them. That's more my site, not kill them. But basically, he goes to the future, and which I thought was really cool. I think the whole future aspect was really cool until you kind of realize it's kind of knocking off Edge of Tomorrow. But
yeah.
He essentially meets his daughter in the future, who's a really great, brilliant scientist, and they have a really interesting chemistry there. And then he's sucked back into the past. I mean, after they kind of figure out how to kill these things. I mean, that's literally the quick synopsis of this movie, right?
Then you have to remember the whole 40 minutes that follows the quick synopsis of finding the aliens and fighting the aliens and.
Oh, yeah. You mean the part where you find out that J.K. Simmons is actually his dad?
Yeah.
Even though he was introduced 20 minutes into the movie, and you're like, who's this crazy old man? But, it's his dad? 2.5 hours in, we find out it's his dad? Okay, dude, real quick, what were your quick thoughts on the Tomorrow War? I'm pretty sure I'm already kind of spilling my thoughts.
So, I'll be honest, I went into this with very low expectations. I'm not a big action fan. And I had a really fun time with this movie to a certain point. It was pretty much that point, once they got into the future and Mary Lynn Rice Cub and the big bearded guy sacrificed themselves, I was like, this movie just lost me. You lost the heart of this movie. These people were so much fun and they were so lovable, and then you just blew them up. But it was fun. It was fun. And if it had ended after he got back to the future, we just had a quick little voiceover of and then we discovered how to kill the aliens, so the war never happened. At the end, I would have been fine. But it was that back 40 minutes that I was just I don't need to watch Chris Pratt punching an alien in the face for 20 minutes. This is so not good.
Don't you love how early he manhandles these aliens? Full on, he tries to one up them against a grizzly bear, essentially, right? And it's his first encounter with them, but in the movie, the way he kills the mother alien, right, is by slicing her throat while he's riding her back. Essentially, it's just
it just got so ridiculous.
Like I said, dude, a Michael Bay film. And the explosions were beautiful. That's what reminded me of Michael Bay. That's why it's a Michael Bay film, even though it's not. But it's really ridiculous, like you said. But the explosions and shot really cool. The action's really cool. All that is really fun. Like you said, it's very entertaining. But the logic behind the movie and the writing for it, like that really undid a lot of what the movie was probably trying to do.
You know, I was sitting there in that first 20 minutes when J.K. Simmons gets introduced. I'm like, this movie does not deserve this performance. Like, he was so good. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then it's like, you just lose him for most of the movie. And it's like, are we ever going to get him back? Because where did he just go?
I know. It's right random. And like, the relationship with his daughter, I feel like the movie kind of focused too much on the relationship with his daughter in the future. Mm-hmm. And it felt very much like an Interstellar moment, right? Where like,
yeah.
And that threw me off though, because what Interstellar did, and it's probably not fair to compare it to Interstellar because like the situations are totally different, right? I mean, when he meets his daughter in Interstellar, she's older than him by like, I don't know, 4 decades, maybe 5 decades. Yeah. Or in this movie, they're pretty much the same age. I'm glad they didn't take like a romantic route with that because it kind of seemed like we might have.
It felt like it was starting to, and I was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?"
Yeah. So, but in that regard, though, like it seemed like they're trying to go for that same feeling that Interstellar had with like the father-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
But in the Tomorrow War, it was very rushed, and like it didn't feel very deserving. You know, like it didn't feel like this is what the core of the story is, like this relationship between the father and daughter. Like that's the story, because you have all this other filler backstory stuff with like the aliens, like you said, the 40 minutes. The last 40 minutes is just them going to Russia to find this alien race and not penetrate. They're so stupid. That's a weird way to end it. They had to penetrate these sacks, right, with this toxin that they find, but they like watched it instead of doing the other ones because, you know, for whatever reason they're like, well, we know, dude, you know what, if I was Chris Pratt, I would have found that fucking mother one first, their very first thing, and just like and do double wham it, put double in there, you know what I mean? Like that's where he messed up. He's not a smart scientist after all if he didn't go for the mother one first.
Well, you know, I was really reminded of the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man with this. And I was waiting for that twist where it was like, you find out that the aliens were sending these people back to recruit people to eat the people they brought back and like just use them to be like, just make us a buffet and pretend it's to fight us. And they didn't do that. I also was waiting for that moment where he's coming back and then it's like, he's talking to her at her wedding or something, and like she's the same age, and he's like, "I watched you die, but I love you and I saved you." But no, he had 40 minutes of punching an alien in the face instead. So
yeah, there's like no real payoff with his daughter. Like we spent the good portion of the middle movie trying to establish that relationship when there was no payoff for it in the end. Like, does he tell her any of that? You know what I mean? Like, does he say you're going to be a great scientist? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And as soon as they started saying, like, there's already a sequel in development, I was just like, oh, so it's like Terminator 2. And it's, yeah, everything we did didn't work, so let's try again.
The Tomorrow War. Like you said, though, it was entertaining. I was entertained. I won't lie. I was entertained, but it was definitely not my... I'm glad I watched it on Amazon and not paid for it in the theater. If I watched it in the theater, I think I'd be a lot more disappointed than I was.
Yeah, like it's one of those that you long for in the summer with just a big bucket of popcorn and to turn your brain off, but like it doesn't make it high art,
right?
Which it doesn't need to be. It's for a very certain audience, and it's fun. Like we can poke holes in it and flaws and see all the ways like scientifically it's inaccurate, but at the end of the day, it's just fun, and it did its job in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. I did like how like them going to the future kind of felt like the Shimmer in Annihilation. You know, like I'm like ooh, otherworldly. Too bad it didn't have like that cool of a soundtrack to go with it. But and by the way, do you like my Photoshop job of me on Chris Pratt's body?
I do. I was almost just like, why didn't he just get... Oh, that is Chaz. Oh, I get it now. Okay. Thought I was just looking at the poster for a second of Chris Pratt, but...
I think it's funny. That's funny. All right, well, we'll move on to our next movie then. Fear Street 1994. The sequel is out today.
Yes.
Netflix. I have not seen it. Have you seen the sequel?
I started it. I got to as far as previously on Fear Street, and then I got distracted with 100 other things. But probably as soon as we're done with this, I will start it and watch it tonight.
Dude, I'll be right there with you in spirit, watching that with you. So Fear Street 1994, though, what were your thoughts on this movie? I mean, like a quick synopsis of this is like it's a throwback slasher flick, sort of, I guess, in a way. Mm-hmm. And it takes place in the 90s, so it's like really nostalgic in that sense. And yeah, I mean, dude, straight up, it's just a slasher flick. Like, yeah. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, these kids figure out the slasher, like the motivation of these slashers or whatever. But
there's someone killing teens in a mask, and you move on.
Yeah, and they even have this like weird sex scene that shouldn't be in there, but it is in there. But it's very nostalgic of slasher flicks being just that. Like,
yeah.
Deuce, what were your thoughts on Fear Street 1994?
Now, again, like I'm one of those people who walks into especially horror movies with the lowest of expectations because I love horror movies above all other genre, and I grew up on the Fear Street books. Like, it was one of those things that once you graduated from Goosebumps, R.L. Stine was there to pick you up with Fear Street. And so I was really excited, but my hopes were not high. And I was so happy when this just fulfilled everything. And I loved the ever-loving hell out of this movie.
Dude, I love the very beginning scene is a huge throwback to another famous movie that we talked about today, Scream.
Yep.
In a mall.
Yeah.
In the 90s with lots of neon.
Yes.
Dude, with Nine Inch Nails is playing in the background too. Like, fuck yeah.
I felt like I was 12 again. Just like, yeah, at the mall, walking into Sam Goody. There's neon everywhere.
See, and the year this movie takes place in was the year I was born, and chances are the time that this movie took place in is probably months before I was born. So,
right.
I'll just say that I was very happy being reminded of that while I was in my dad's sperm.
That's one way of looking at it, I suppose.
Dude, I remember Nine Inch Nails before I was even like conceived, you know?
No, but this is one of those movies again where it was just a turn your brain off. Like, you didn't have to think hard because the movie was giving you enough exposition that was just like, there's a witch, and these are the rules, and this is how the witch is operating, and this is this massacre that happened in the 70s. But like knowing there are 2 more movies that are coming in the coming weeks, I was like, I love this because it's not being like, oh, in a couple of years, maybe we're going to be desperate to do a sequel and we might revisit this thing in the 70s. We don't know. So like these little hints, I was already just like, oh yeah, you're intriguing me for the sequel in a week. I'm so on board.
Yeah, it's like the Fear Street trilogy in that sense, right?
Well, and I love too that they didn't have a problem with killing people. Like, main characters are introduced and they're just like, here's this main character, get to know him, love him. Yeah, they're dead now. We're just going to kill them.
See, one of my criticisms of the movie was that it seemed like it was geared towards a teenage audience, but they would have these really graphic scenes where there's no way a teenage audience would see that if you're not 17. Because, I mean, it is rated R, right? I mean, is it rated R? But,
yeah, it's gotta be.
But there's a scene where like you see this lady go through like this meat grinder and her whole head is just fucking like shredded. And that's very graphic for as tame as this movie's kind of been.
That's one thing where like I agree with you in theory, but then I think back to when I was a kid and the movies I was watching at like 10, 11, 12 years old that were just as graphic. And I'm like, oh yeah, kids shouldn't watch this, but I also I know people with kids, and it's like, 6-year-olds are walking in talking about Deadpool and Saw, and it's like,
what?
In theory, kids should not be able to see this stuff, but kids always have. So to me, it's like, yeah, this is aimed at teenagers because yeah, teenagers are gonna find a way. They always have. That's how movies have existed since the beginning of time.
Dude, I love this movie though. I had good fun with it. I wonder if there's gonna be costumes coming out from this movie. Like if it's gonna be that memorable.
I guarantee. Like I already was just like Halloween. I want to be the skeleton killer. Like he was great.
Well, and that's the thing too. Is like it feels like a lot of these killers, like these slashers, are homages to slashers that we've known to love. You know, the first one was obviously Scream. Mm-hmm. Like there's no way that's not Scream. You know, and then the axe dude was totally Jason.
Yeah.
Like. I love it, dude.
I was just waiting for some wisecracker to come out and be our Freddy Krueger for this movie. Like,
dude, we might see that in 1970s. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't know. I'm really excited to see where they go from here. Like, even the one I forget if it's like 1886 or whatever.
1666.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see what they do with that one.
Well, it has 3 6s in it, so 666.
Oh, yeah. Because that was actually... When Blair Witch 2 came out, like they planned a third one that was going to be this old-timey, like the actual Blair Witch, and I was so excited for that. But Blair Witch 2 was such a flaming pile of dog shit that they were like, "Yeah, we're not giving you a third one. This bombed way too hard."
It's called The Witch. Thank you very much.
Yes. Eventually, we got it like 20 years later, but.
Duh. That was the start, dude. How crazy would that be if that movie was like Blair Witch 3, the prequel?
I would not have been surprised after they pulled that shit with the Blair Witch like sequel, remake, reboot thing.
The Woods.
It was called The Woods forever, and then all of a sudden they're just like, just kidding, it's a Blair Witch sequel.
Oh my god, dude, we can nerd about that like more in October because I like the Blair Witch a lot. We'll talk more about it. But Fear Street 1994. What would you rate this overall?
If I'm giving it like a 4-star rating, I think it's a solid 3 stars. Like it's not breaking new ground. It's not amazing, but it does its job really well. And it's playing with just enough nostalgia to make me be like, oh, yeah, this is what 1994 was like. This is what the movies of that era were like. But it's like, it's got a few things that I'm like, okay, this is too modern for me.
I agree. I'd agree with that. I think on Letterboxd, I give it 3.5 out of 5. But, I mean, if you do the math, it's like 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 4. Yeah. Yes, so we'll be watching the sequel tonight. Let us know what you thought of Fear Street 1994 and the Tomorrow War. Deuce, do you want to talk real quick about No Sudden Moves? Because I know this isn't really a mainstream movie, but being both cinephiles, I think we can both enjoy. I enjoyed No Sudden Move. It's on HBO Max, directed by Steven Soderbergh, right? With Del Toro and what is his name?
Don Cheadle.
Yeah, Don Cheadle. Yep. Both did a fantastic job.
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser. Do we spoil the cameo guy that always does cameos randomly in the movies?
I mean, you've already spoiled everything else tonight, so.
All right, yeah, Matt Damon, dude. What the fuck?
And Ray Liotta was in there.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah, this cast was incredible.
Yeah, and it's a very old school heist movie, kind of a super old school noir vibe to it.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on it going in?
This popped up on HBO, and I probably would not have watched it had you not said, "Will you watch this?" Because it just looked so full of itself and so like one of those film school movies where it's like turning up its nose and being like, "I'm smarter than you, but here's my art for you to maybe understand." But I really enjoyed it for the most part. Like, I thought the performances were super strong. I thought the story was great. It was such a noir movie, which I am such a huge noir fan that I'm like, yes, this is noir structure. This is noir pacing. This is noir acting. This is great.
Lighting. Yep.
Lighting, everything about it. But there were just there was something about it. And I think the two things, the fisheye lens drove me absolutely bonkers, and I thought it was too sharp. Like, the camera was too high digital. Like, I could see every pixel perfectly. And I'm like, no, I want that grit. I want that kind of Vaseline on the lens. Things are soft and not in focus perfectly. Like, that's noir to me.
Yeah, I think it should have been black and white. I wonder if there will be a black and white version eventually. Because I think that will add a lot more to it, especially if they add like the artificial film grain on it. Because I know they shot on a red camera, according to IMDb. Yeah. But like you said, that fish lens, the fisheye lens, the whole movie shot like that, and it threw me through a loop for the first 10 minutes. I'm like, what in the hell? Like, why are you doing this? Like,
I honestly thought that I was watching it on my computer, and I'm like, is my monitor screwed up? What is going on here? Nope, that's just the movie.
No, dude, that's just Steven Soderbergh doing his thing, you know? And I was talking to you earlier that day, or the day before, because he was on a podcast with Mark Maron, and I was asking, like, how you felt about him, and was this movie pretty much what you would have expected from Steven Soderbergh?
You know, he's one of those directors that is always surprising me. So to say you're expecting something from Steven Soderbergh is almost impossible, because this is the guy that went from, like, I'm going to do the Ocean's 11 movies to I'm going to do Magic Mike to I'm going to do a horror movie on an iPhone. Like, there's no expecting what Soderbergh's going to do next, but it did have a very... If you said, like, Soderbergh is doing this type of movie, it wouldn't surprise me. But to me, this felt like Soderbergh looked at No Country for Old Men and said, oh, this is the Coen brothers doing a Western? This is how I'm going to do a noir. Fisheye lens.
Dude, that's actually a pretty fair analysis, I would say.
Yeah.
And it seems like he always throws in some, like, political stuff in his movies to some degree. No less, this movie has a political message at the end, but it's really subtle. Oh, yeah. I love how subtle it is, but he still hits the nail on the head.
Well, and you know, it's one of those. That's what I love about noir too, is that the stakes are so incredibly low at the end of the day.
Yep.
And there's so much murder and so much betrayal, and there's always money involved, but somehow the money is always like the third thing that's important in all of this.
It's the way he, like, also kind of controls the threads of the characters, and like how he's able to pretty much show us the perspective of each character, but still make them intertwine and in the end connect fully.
Yeah.
To get that ending. And I don't know, I liked it. And the score is pretty cool too, dude. It reminded me of Mank with Trent Reznor, you know, that whole score with Mank. So I wonder if they'll do a black and white version of this movie to really add to that noir grittiness, because right now, if it's not that, I'd probably consider it neo-noir. But I mean, it definitely has more vibes for the old school noir than it does neo. So it's just that, like you said, it's too crisp.
Yeah, it was just too crisp. That's the only way of putting it. Like, I really enjoyed it though. Like, I'm so happy I did watch it, because it is a masterclass in acting and directing, and some of the angles were a little odd to me, that he kept doing these, like, Dutch tilts, and I'm like, okay, cool, but
I mean,
I've seen much worse, so.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that if you're shooting on, like, a 14mm lens.
Yeah, exactly.